We have talked a lot about women in business, leadership, and entrepreneurship roles. But in order to truly break down barriers for women in these roles, we need to address how to interrupt attitudes, tackle stereotypes, and change norms for gender in society. Up next, Michelle Milford Morse, Vice President for Girls and Women's Strategy at UN Foundation, will talk to business leaders, social media influencers, and economists on what it takes to change mindsets and tackle stereotypes. But first, let's hear from Iris Bonnet, Academic Dean of the Harvard Kennedy School. Iris is a behavioral economist combining insights from economics and psychology to improve decision-making in organizations and society, often with a gender or cross-cultural perspective. She is the author of the award-winning book, What Works? Gender Equality by Design, and advises governments and companies on the topic around the world. Iris, over to you.
Lydia, thank you very much for this very kind introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. It's a great honor to speak at today's UN Global Compact event on target gender equality. In the 1970s, some of the major symphony orchestras in the United States introduced a new audition protocol. They had musicians audition behind a curtain. Research suggests that the curtain helped increase the fraction of female musicians substantially. It enabled orchestra directors and selection committees to do justice to the music they heard without being distracted by the stereotypes they might have held about men's and women's ability to make great music. Stereotypes, as we just heard on the previous panel, are real, and they have nothing to do with women per se, of course, but rather with whether or not a person fits our expectations of what a musician, a nurse, a venture capitalist, or in my case, an economist looks like. Unfortunately, we tend to be, often unconsciously, biased against people who do not look the part. That is, male nurses and male kindergarten teachers, but also female venture capitalists and female economists. These biases are systemic, and thus, one of my most important messages today is this: let's fight systemic bias with systemic solutions. Let us redesign how we live, how we learn, and how we work. So I'm a behavioral economist, as Lydia just said, and sometimes I refer to the work that we do as behavioral design. But we're all designers. You are designers of workplaces, of products, of policies, and of programs. And some work better than others. But why? What can we learn from behavioral science, a discipline that studies how our minds work, on the design of our organizations? And most importantly for our topic today, on how to redesign our organizations to be able to truly benefit from 100% of the talent pool. COVID-19 is a huge challenge, but it is also an opportunity for us collectively to do better on gender equality, because it is both the right and the smart thing to do. Design is what my research is about, but it is also a mnemonic that can provide a framework for the work we need to do together. The D in design stands for data. What doesn't get measured doesn't count. Data tell the story often louder than words. One company I worked with found that women stay longer in role before being promoted, even in controlling for part-time work. Another one found that women were promoted to less significant roles than their male counterparts. And another one that women, and in particular, women of color, gave themselves lower self-evaluations than their male counterparts in their performance appraisals. Data help us diagnose what is broken for men, for women, BIPOC, BAME, or whites, and all relevant intersectionalities, of course, and not just throw money at the problem. For example, unfortunately, I have not found much evidence that diversity training is working. It can do one thing. raising awareness. But then we have to equip our managers to follow through on their virtuous intentions. Diversity and inclusion is a bit like healthy eating. It is good for us. It is the right thing to do. It is the smart thing to do. But that does not mean that we will naturally follow through. Homophobia, unfortunately, is real. And so are stereotypes and unconscious bias. Data tell the tale, and if we want to be serious about gender equality, we have to fix what is broken. Address DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, the way we address any other business problem, with rigor and evidence. Which leads me to the E in design. The E stands for evaluation. Too often, organizations across the sectors, whether that's public, private, or NGOs, just copy each other. It is sometimes referred to as best practice. But best practice only means that many companies or organizations or governments or NGOs are doing it. Not that it is based on the best evidence available, or even that anyone cared to evaluate, but that what we're doing is in fact working. So yes, I'm a bit on a mission here. How can it be that we use more rigor in our marketing departments, where we regularly do A/B testing, than in our HR departments? In particular today, when human capital often is our most important resource. Of course, technology matters as well. And in many ways, it is an opportunity for us. Yes, AI can be biased, as a firm using machine learning to help with succession planning, for example, discovered. If your training set is derived from the past, it just is pale and male. One firm called me about a specific tech company's recruitment AI tool. Should they use it? Did I endorse it? My answer was, you should evaluate. This was for financial analysts, and my recommendation was this: run everyone through your traditional hiring protocol, and in parallel, have everyone be evaluated by the AI tool. Then compare the finalists of each. Do they differ in demographic characteristics, test performance, schools they went to, other backgrounds? This is how we learn and get better. AI, of course, is just one of the tools in our collective toolbox, and so are blind evaluation procedures. But it is these tools that are necessary to move beyond raising awareness. We have to equip our employees with the tools they need to deliver on gender equality. Thus, the remainder of design, the sign, stands for signposts. I am Swiss, and if you have ever been hiking in the Swiss mountains, you will appreciate my passion for signposts. They tell you how to get from A to B, how long it will take, and how hard it will be. Signposts show you the way. Take the firm thinking about its performance appraisal system. Should it keep sharing self-evaluations with managers before the latter make up their minds the way they had always done? That is a design choice about a practice that is quite prevalent across sectors, including here at Harvard, I might add. But what if people differ in their ability to shine the light on themselves? What if we found systematic differences in self-evaluations based on culture? Broadly, think East versus West, or by gender, or by race. And indeed, that's what we did. And what if these self-appraisals led to self-fulfilling prophecies? What if they influenced managers because they were shared with them before they made up their minds? It's not exactly rocket science, and indeed, what we found in examining the data of a global financial services firm headquartered in the US. Based on our research, they decided to discontinue sharing self-evaluations with managers to set new signposts, a different path to evaluate an employee's performance that is both more accurate and more fair. You can do this too. You can redesign your job advertisements, scrutinizing them for gendered language that may be more likely to appeal to one of the genders. You can redesign your interview protocols, relying less on impressions and more on work sample tests. You can address gender equality the way you would address any other business problem, by setting targets, as the title of our conference today suggests, so that people can manage towards those goals. And note, design, of course, goes beyond formal procedures. You can also redesign how you run your meetings, making sure that all people's contributions count and that everyone is given credit for their comments. So this is a bit a call to action, to design. That is, to be guided by the data, evaluate the impact of what you do, and create signposts that help lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. First to the UN Global Compact for hosting this important conversation, and also to Lydia, our very able MC all day long, and Iris, thank you for encouraging us to de-bias how we live, how we learn, how we work, and also giving us some tools to do that. I love what you said. We need to fight systemic bias with systemic solutions. And we're going to talk about that today. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Milford Morris. I'm the Vice President of Girls and Women's Strategy at the UN Foundation. And I'm really delighted to get to moderate this worthwhile discussion with you all today. Gender stereotypes and harmful norms and the way they reinforce harmful social norms, they're among the biggest challenges that we have in gender equality. All people deserve the opportunity to author their own story, but stereotypes take away the pen. All people deserve the opportunity to define their full potential, but harmful norms often interfere with and diminish our potential. So today we're going to take on this stubborn set of challenges. And for this conversation, I'm so pleased to be joined by this group of global leaders, change makers, and norm breakers. First, we have Wendy Clark, who joined Dentsu International's global CEO in September of 2020, bringing with her a wealth of experience from both client and agency side. And today, she's one of the most senior female leaders in global advertising at the global advertising agency sector. She believes in the ethos, lift as you climb, and in taking calculated bets on talented women. Welcome, Wendy. Lift as you climb. I love it.
Hey, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Next, I'm so pleased to welcome Takalani Nechatenze. She is the Chief Officer and Executive Director of External Affairs for Vodacom South Africa and Chairperson of the Vodacom Foundation. She's a public policy development expert who is passionate about corporate social responsibility. She actively promotes the role of technology in advancing progress towards gender equality and the SDGs. So glad to have you with us, Taki.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm glad to be here.
We're also joined by Marcel Fratscher. He is the president of the German Institute for Economic Research and professor of macroeconomics at Humboldt Universität in Berlin. Among other roles, he is a member of the high-level advisory board of the UN on the SDGs and a member of the scientific advisory board of the German Ministry of the Economy. His work focuses on economic inequalities, and in his latest book, he advocates to use the coronavirus pandemic as a chance to reform the state, society, and economy. I know we can agree with that. Welcome, Marcel.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
And finally, I'm so glad to welcome Louie Cole. He is a champion of the Spotlight Initiative, and he is a storyteller, a filmmaker, and an activist. He's been uploading videos to YouTube for almost 10 years, sharing his adventures traveling the world and vlogging his life. And most recently, Louie co-founded the Social Good Club, a network of social media influencers working for social justice. His passion is to inspire people to experience other cultures and get out of their own bubble. Welcome, Louie, and thank you for being a champion for the Spotlight Initiative.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good to meet you all. Looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Well, let's start by picking up on the ideas that Iris so beautifully presented about how to de-bias the workplace. I'm going to come first to Wendy and then to Taki. Can you share your thoughts on what works when we try to de-bias our workplace?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I mean, obviously, there's a significant amount of work to take into account as we move forward here. As Iris was just saying with that example of the orchestra auditions, we have to remove that bias in the process. So simple things like ensuring that we take CVs or resumes and take any indication that could indicate any aspect of someone's diversity in it, so that we take that bias out of consideration. Similarly, we have to have diverse interview panels. So we can't have diverse candidates come and interview with undiverse panels of people at our company. So the diversity has to exist on both sides. We obviously have to undertake the hard work of pay equity studies and be transparent with the outcomes of those. And we also, again, as Iris just indicated, have to have targets and ambitions that are stated, that our leaders are held accountable for achieving. And what we found is even making those targets external, so that we can hold ourselves both internally accountable and externally accountable. Dentsu International just announced during International Women's Day last week that we intend to be gender equal at all levels of leadership in the organization. So not just the funnel of middle management, but up to and including my team and senior management. We will be 50-50 equal gender by 2025. And we're going to hold ourselves accountable both internally and through the external publication, of our progress to that. And finally, I think there are initiatives and programs that we can allow our employees to participate in. We participate in a program called Female Foundry, where we sponsored now over 100 female entrepreneurs through helping them with tools, training, connections, and resources so that they can go into the world and prosper. Our teams love being part of that. We obviously then create part of a lasting good in society. So it has to be internal, external, it has to be public and private. It has to happen, and we have to hold ourselves accountable.
Thank you, Wendy. Taki, your thoughts on the question?
Thank you. Organizations have policies and training programs, and these are easy to have, especially for compliance purposes. However, I always say if these two tools were effective, we would not be hearing month after month, year after year, explosive details on allegations of sexual harassment, racism, and bullying in the workplace. 2 years ago, I attended a session where the Gender Equality Commission of South Africa was engaging various organizations on diversity in the workplace. And they found that women drop out in the pipeline, leaving fewer women in executive positions. They also found that promotions in certain disciplines favor white males, leaving women and men of color in junior or in middle management positions. And how does the culture manifest? We always hear, Michelle, of the old boys club. They drink together, they play golf together, they share the same jokes, most toxic jokes when they are on their own. Firstly, socialization makes human beings to be inclined to people that look and behave like them. So when we walk into the room full of strangers, we tend to navigate towards the person that looks or sounds like us, or the person that holds the same views as us, because we assume that those people would be more accepting to us of us than others. So we need to free ourselves of these biases by being conscious of our inclinations. It is not easy. It is a journey, I believe, that every human being who believes in inclusion must walk. And how do we achieve this? Firstly, we need to be aware of our bias and how it influences the decisions that we make and how it influences the people around us. And secondly, when unconscious bias manifests, it needs to be called out, because the perpetrator is usually unaware of their bias and its impact. The most common form of bias that go unattended to in the workplace is rude interjections. Studies indicate that when men speak to women, they interrupted about 33% more than when they speak to other men. And thanks to COVID-19, because in the virtual space, you can raise your hand and be allowed to speak than in the physical world, where it is the battle of who is the loudest in the room. So when interruptions occur, you must call it out, because if you don't, your voice is going to be drowned, and the interrupter leaves that meeting unaware of the disruptive impact of their disruption. And thirdly, we need to create time to learn that people come from different cultural backgrounds and that no culture of anybody is superior to another. And this is a lesson that I learned as a diplomat, that we have different DNAs. Some people are loud, some people are soft-spoken, some people are so fast they can speak 100 words in a minute without breathing. Others speak slowly and they prefer to listen to every word that they say. So we need to be accommodative. And fourthly, when you are running a meeting as a leader or as a manager, you should know the different character traits in the room and allow every person an opportunity to speak. It may not be possible in one sitting, especially when you've got a bigger team, but always create those moments where somebody's star is going to be allowed to shine. And lastly, ask for feedback from colleagues that you work very closely with about whether your behavior displays unconscious bias or not, and use that feedback constructively. Of course, we are human. We live in a toxic world. We make mistakes, but we need to constantly reflect on our inclinations and introspect about our biases, because failure to recognize unconscious bias can lead to the extreme forms of gender and racial discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you, Taki. I can imagine our viewers writing down notes to reflect, to ask for feedback, to consider the insights that you're sharing with us. Thank you. Marcel, I want to turn to you now. You have an expertise in gender data. What can gender data tell us about bias and discrimination? And where do we not have enough data? Where are we blind with regard to those impacts?
Yeah, first of all, it is really important to quantify gender biases, to create awareness and to correct wrong perceptions. What we see often in our surveys and data is that, take a very simple example. When you ask people, so who's working more, men or women? You would mostly get the answer, yes, of course, men are working more. Because people have in mind that if you look at formal labor force participation, usually that's higher among men who have paid work. But then if you actually quantify it, and we have done that at studies also at the German Institute for Economic Research, who is actually spending what time on what activity, you realize that actually if you include housework, if you include childcare, if you include care work for older people, for relatives, for parents, women spend a lot more time each day on all of these different types of activities than men. And when you present people with that data and say, look, that was your answer, but look at the facts, look at the numbers, people often realize, oh, I've had a wrong perception, and they correct the perception. So first, data is really important to address these moral blind spots and make these gender biases visible. I think that's a very important first step, because there is so much misperception. The second is we really need this data, and we try to measure things in order to identify causes of different gender biases. And take the gender pay gap, right? And people often say, well, you have big gender pay gaps in Europe, often around 15 to 20%. And people say, yes, but look, isn't that really a free choice? Isn't that the free choice of women? And then you realize at the gender, if you explain the gender pay gap, there are usually three factors explaining a large chunk of it. It's that women far more often work formal part-time in paid work rather than full-time. They work in certain professions that are paid much lower hourly wages, and they very often are not in top management positions, so they're in lower positions within companies. And if you then look at it and analyze it, is this a free choice that women take? You realize, no, it's not a free choice. It's based on many hurdles that are put in the way of women. It's based on discrimination and factors, again, that are not the free choice of people, in particular of women. So that's important to understand what the causes are. And then my third point, you need this data to identify the consequences and possible solutions. And Iris put it very nicely about the evaluation, right? We need to understand what works. If we want to address certain gender biases. And oftentimes we realize also in our evaluation, certain measures don't work. We have looked at the quota for executive boards, including in Germany, realize, well, it has not worked as we expected it to work. And so we really need to have this data to understand what solutions work, how can we learn from other countries, how can we implement best practices. So in short, this data really helps us make progress, not only create awareness, but also to create solutions for these gender biases.
Thank you, Marcel. You've really illuminated for us the importance of data in addressing these challenges. So I'm going to do a quick lightning round with Wendy and Taki, just so we can make sure. I know everyone wants to hear all of your insights. Wendy, first, I want you to give us just what's one important thing that we need to know about this See Her report you did about perceptions, about consumer perceptions of gender equality. And then Taki, I want to know one thing you want us to know about the Vodafone app that you have also released that is going to combat gender-based violence. So maybe we'll go to Wendy first for a quick answer.
Sure, Michelle. This study was undertaken in the US, so it is US data. But I think it really just underscores principally that most Americans see that advertising and marketing should be part of the solution. Media should be part of the solution. So 52% of the respondents suggested that media could principally shape and change how we view gender. When you cut into women, that jumps to about 80% suggests that media can impact how we regard gender and see roles and stereotypes. And then up to 85% when you talk about can media actually shape how children see the differences between girls and boys, and that girls can do everything that boys can do. So media bears a huge responsibility in this, and consumers collectively believe that media can shape how we will change society. So there is a very, very important role and connection here as we think about advertising, marketing, and media.
It's an important call to action for consumers. You can choose products that portray girls and women in fair ways and that abandon the idea of diminishment of girls and women. Taki, over to you. Tell us about the Vodafone app that you've created and its role in fighting gender-based violence.
Thank you very much, Michelle. The app that we launched last year in November is actually part of our gender-based violence ecosystem. Because in Vodacom, we started looking at the intersection between prevention, response, and victim support in order to ensure that we don't just focus on one area of gender-based violence. But we believe that charity begins at home. So we support people in the communities in which we operate, and we also support our employees. And our employees, we have a domestic violence policy, which supports our employees, because we recognize that our employees are actually part of a toxic society. They are part of a patriarchal society that promotes gender-based violence. And through this policy, we provide 10 days leave, and we also link it to our total wellness programs. But then for the people in the communities in which we operate, on prevention, we run webinars. We bring gender experts to the workplace, and we also go with them to various parts of communities where we operate, so that we create awareness around issues of gender-based violence. So the app is actually centered around that. The app was developed by us in consultation with civil society organizations, because we wanted the script that is used in the app to talk to South African societal norms. The app today is 0 rated. It is free to download. 0 rated means that if you are a Vodacom subscriber, you can be able to access the content of the app without actually incurring data costs. The most important features of the app, Michelle, is that they have stories that depict real life experiences on stereotypes around gender-based violence. You read about stories where young people are talking about how they go on dates, and then when they go back to their room, they are forced into sexual activity because the person who took them out on a date believes that they owe them something. You hear stories about people from the LGBTIQ plus community who are forced by their parents, to go through religious and cultural rituals because the parents believe that they are cursed. So we developed that app with that in mind. The app is also linked to the criminal justice system in South Africa. So through the app, you can be able to call the police. You can also be able to call the Gender-Based Violence Command Center, which is anchored by Vodacom in partnership with government. The app also gives access to the shelters for victims and survivors of gender-based violence. But the most fundamental feature of the app is that it also has a journal where the person who is in an abusive relationship, or if you know somebody who's in an abusive relationship, you can advise them to use that journal. You can be able to record all incidences of abuse, because most incidences of abuse go unattended to in the criminal justice system because the evidence is not properly captured. We also have online safety tips so that when you use the app, you should use it responsibly. Thank you.
Taki, that is a really great app. Thank you for sharing that with us. I want to turn now. We have two male allies. Louie, we lost you for a minute. We got you back. I'm so glad. So I want to address this first question to you, which is that you're using your voice as a social media influencer to bring attention to gender equality and also about stereotypes, and particularly for the Spotlight Initiative. Tell us a little bit why you got involved in that. And then Marcel, I'm going to turn to you and ask how we can get more allies like you and like Louie. Louie, over to you.
Okay, hopefully it works this time. Sorry, I cut out before. So last year I co-founded the Social Good Club, and the aim is to, I guess, engage with influencers and online creators to make social impact issues more accessible, that they can share with their audiences, and kind of break this, I think sometimes this wall or boundary that people have to learn about and access important issues in the world, because it's kind of overwhelming. We then partnered with the UN Spotlight Initiative, with the hashtag With Her campaign. And the idea for us, and something I was really excited to do, was talk about these issues, talk about how can we start building a better world for women, to educate men, to educate kind of the audiences that we have, and realizing that in a lot of ways we try and like stick a band-aid on what we see as the I guess the things that we initially identify as the problem. But really, if you dig down and look at the root issues, you realize we live in this world which is deeply systemically misogynistic. And like I've done a lot of my own learning and realizing how this world is built for me to win, especially as a white man, and really starting to dismantle that and understand, okay, how do we build a world that supports women more, especially in the world of media? And that's the world I'm in, kind of online new media. So we set up a pledge as a Social Good Club in our partnership to start seeing a cultural change within media and identifying, okay, where does media perpetuate this idea of toxic masculinity? Where are the root causes that build this invisible kind of misogynistic world? So a lot of men, and myself included, like as I learned more and more and educated myself around these issues and learned about the data, I read an amazing book called Invisible Women, which basically, showed how, every system we live by is stacked against women. So all of this was to help creators and people in the media to start that journey and those conversations. So we set up resources and held group conversations where we could really dig into these issues, and then get people to commit to a pledge to say, yeah, I'm on this journey to do better, to look at the content I'm creating, to look at the messages that I'm perpetuating, and to start seeing a shift within the media, within our audiences, and then hopefully to society. So that's what we've been doing, and it's been an amazing, enlightening journey.
All right, male allies out there in waiting. Louie is showing you how to do that. Thank you, Louie, and thank you for your work for the Spotlight Initiative. Marcel, how do we get more male allies like you and Louie? What do we got to do?
I think convincing Louie and me is easy. You already have them convinced, and I think maybe we need less convincing, and we need convincing, but also empowering. And what we see in our research often is that if you look at the young generation of men, especially in Europe and United States, is many of them actually would like to remove gender biases and take the labor market. They wish that their partners, their daughters, their granddaughters, their sisters have the same opportunity in the labor market as they do. If you look at family values, many young men today and fathers say they want to spend as much time with their children as do their partners and the mothers of the children. So there is this desire to participate and to have more gender equality. And oftentimes it's making policy changes to allow men who want to do this to be able to do that. So there is this cultural change that Louie was describing is partly already there, but clearly we need to do more. That's no question. Maybe very quick second one. I'm an economist, so I'm supposed to say something about economics, but if I had to put it in one sentence on the economy and the labor market, women are probably the largest untapped economic potential we have in every country, in every economy. Women often, I have to admit, mostly our research is on Europe. Women often have better training, better education than men, have a higher likelihood of finishing school, going to university, going to complete their studies or the first degree. And so they're better qualified. But when it comes to the labor market, in particular after founding a family, then you have often a big break. So there is a huge potential or our economies are not using. And for many countries with demographic change and a lack of skilled workers, it's actually really essential to mobilize those resources. So creating opportunity for women is good for men, also from an economic point of view. So it's a win-win. And I think focusing on that we all are winners in the personal sphere as a family, but also in the professional sphere is, I think, a very important step to mobilize more supporters also among men.
Thank you, Marcel. You're right. The data is really clear. We have just a few seconds left. So I'm asking you, as fast as you've ever given advice to an audience ever, the one thing people can do to debias their workplace or their home. Wendy, you first.
In the companies, it's got to be action and accountability. This topic is easy to talk about. It's easy to have a narrative. We've got to get to accountable actions and transparent reporting to make progress.
Louie, over to you.
I would say educate yourself, speak out, and start the conversations with people around you.
Marcel.
Lead by example. I think it's important for us to set an example and to create a more diverse environment in which we work and live. And especially for us men, it's important to do that.
Taki, you get the last word.
When you see unconscious bias, call it out and hold the leaders accountable.
Thank you. I feel so inspired by all of your guidance and your insights today. I'm sure our audience does as well. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us about interrupting stereotypes, debunking bias, and striving for something fairer and better for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, what a panel. Thank you so much to all our panelists. We learned about the psychology behind the behavior of stereotype reproduction, how the media can reproduce the best and the worst of our cultural values, and how to use social media resources to improve personal behavior and tackle misogyny from the personal to the global level. That's what this is all about.